Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for TWiT specials is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiT Live Special number 134, recorded August 5th, 2012, the Mars Curiosity Landing. Breaking news of the Mars Curiosity Landing is brought to you by Slingbox, which can turn your iPad into a television. With the iPad app from Slingbox, you can watch your home TV on your iPad anywhere you go. Check it out at slingbox.com/twit. Welcome to TWiT's coverage of breaking news, the landing of the Mars Science Laboratory, a.k.a. the rover Curiosity. And just about 35 minutes here, we're going to get the first tones from the Curiosity rover, whether it has landed successfully on Mars or not. All of our breaking news coverage on TWiT, of course, always brought to you by Slingbox. Slingbox lets you watch your home TV anywhere you can go. You can control and watch your DVR. Don't have to pay for special services. You're not limited to certain channels. Works with an iPad, any smartphone, iPod Touch, or laptop, or tablet. And to get started, you just connect it to the internet and to your home TV. Anywhere you get an internet signal, you can watch your home TV. Slingbox available at Best Buy and Amazon, and you can learn more at slingbox.com/twit. Joining us for the coverage today, with us for the whole hour, John Strickland from the Tech Stuff Podcast and HowStuffWorks.com. Thanks for staying up really late out there on the East Coast, John.
Actually, I just got up really early.
or getting up very early. Appreciate that. And Justin Robert Young from the Weird Things podcast and NSFW show joining us as well. You've lived in Florida.
Yeah.
So, near Cape Canaveral.
I'm a huge space fan. I was up there for the SpaceX launch before I left. But this is incredibly exciting, and it's just a beautiful time to be alive.
Looking forward to it. We're trying to get Phil Plait, the bad astronomer, on the line to talk to us as well. And we're going to talk in a few minutes to Steve Sell, the Deputy Operations Lead for the Entry, Descent, and Landing Team. Steve Sell is responsible for the Sky Crane. If you don't know what the Sky Crane is, let me run through what's going to happen here. At about 24 minutes after the hour, Mars Curiosity rover will begin its entry into atmosphere on Mars at 5.8 kilometers per second. For about 4 minutes, the atmosphere will slow it down, but the atmosphere is very thin on Mars. It will decelerate to about 500 meters per second, fire off 6 tungsten weights that weigh 25 kilograms apiece straight out the side. That slows it down a little bit. It also will deploy a supersonic parachute. It will fall with that parachute for a while. About 29 minutes after the hour, the heat shield will fall off. It won't be necessary anymore. Radar will lock on the surface, try to make sure they're going to the right place. It'll be going about 150 meters per second at that point. And about 29 minutes after the hour is when we lose direct observation of the rover. We'll be relying on the Mars Odyssey satellite to give us information on it at that point. 30 minutes after hour, the parachute goes off. The back shell separates. The rover and the Sky Crane will then be exposed, and they'll move horizontally away from the back shell so that they won't land in the same place. Also at that point, the Sky Crane throttles up its engines to 100% and starts using them to slow the descent by firing down. They're about 1.5 kilometers above the surface at that point. 31 minutes after the hour, they should be about 55 meters above the surface, and descent should be slowed to about 20 meters per second. And then when the rover gets to 20 meters above the surface of Mars, 4 of the 8 engines will shut off. The rover will separate from the Sky Crane apparatus and descend to the surface of Mars on cables. That's the craziest part of this whole thing. That's what Steve Sell is responsible for. The bogey wheels will deploy on the rover. It will land on the surface, we hope. And when the cables go slack, that's the signal for the rover to disconnect the cables. Once the cables disconnect, the Sky Crane senses that, flies off away, and crash lands so that it's not going to contaminate any of the area that the rover is going to explore. And then the actual mission begins. Pretty crazy stuff, John.
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated procedure to land a 1-ton vehicle on the surface of Mars. This is a much larger rover than the previous ones that we've sent up there. The other ones have used other methods for landing, so that's why this whole Sky Crane thing was necessary, because you can't use those methods to land something as large and as heavy as the Curiosity rover. So I'm very, very excited to see if this in fact works, because if it does, it is a true feat of engineering.
And just to give people context, again, this is a $2.5 billion project. And to give you context, the NASA budget was cut from $1.5 billion to $1.2 billion in the coming fiscal year. So we are talking about something that is over twice the size of what next year's NASA budget is.
And that doesn't mean they went over budget. It's over time.
Yeah,
they've spent that much. Yeah.
But like, just so you know what this means to NASA from what they get per year.
All right, we've got Phil Plait on the line with us. Phil, I know you're doing a hangout. We're going to let you get back to that real quickly, but we've sort of told everybody what's going to happen tonight. Technically speaking, how do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, okay. Sure. Why don't you just throw me in that way?
Give us the odds. Give us the odds, Phil.
Tell us for sure, Phil, that this is going to go great.
Yeah. Well, the odds are 50-50 because it'll either work or it won't. It's tough to say. I'm not an engineer.
Sure.
I'm an astronomer, and I tend to, look at stars that blow up and not so much planets that are nearby. But having said that, there have been several dozen missions that have been sent to Mars in the past 50 years. And the success rate for getting them to work is half or maybe even less. For rovers, for landers, I should say, there have been quite a few sent and a lot of failures. But for rovers, the United States has sent 4 rovers, and that would be Pathfinder, Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity.
Phoenix.
Yeah, and those the first 3 have been perfectly successful, and in fact, Spirit and Opportunity worked beyond our wildest expectations. Those had bizarre methods of landing on the surface, including airbags and bouncing like a Super Bowl. And this one is maybe more crazy, but not like crazily more crazy.
Yeah, right. No, I know exactly what you mean. With all that risk and all that expense, what's the benefit we're going to get from this? Why is it worth doing?
Because we're exploring the unknown. This is the best thing humans do. You can put a price tag on it. People are saying, well, it's hard to put a price tag on that. And it's actually, $2 billion or whatever.
Right.
But this is increasing our knowledge of Mars. And it's also doing a lot of things like increasing our ability to make good technology, our ability to send things to other planets, our abilities to explore. One thing we've known about NASA and about space exploration for a long time is that we're not spending money on it. We're investing money in it. We get money back from doing this. And you can't point at something and say, this will be something we'll get money on and this one we won't. But what happens is you do more and more of this, you do start to get that money back. And in fact, Apollo has essentially paid itself off in the time since we've done it. And a lot of our exploration does this as well. And that's just the money, and I hate to talk that way. This is something we need to do. We need to explore. We need to see what's around the corner. We need to see what's over the hill. Mars is a planet that used to be like Earth. It's not anymore. Venus is a planet that may have been like Earth, and it's not anymore. Why are these planets different than us? What is it that happened to them that didn't happen to us or vice versa that made them inhabitable and makes our planet such a wonderful place? We need to learn this stuff, if only for our own self-interest, but also because these are some of the biggest questions we have. Is there life out there in the universe? And if it's out there, could it possibly be on one of the closest planets in the entire universe to us? That's one of the greatest questions we can ask.
I couldn't agree more. Phil, I know you got to go and do the hangout, but I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of share with us the purpose behind this. Do follow Phil at badastronomer.com, badastronomy.com, that's my.com, and the Bad Astronomer on Twitter. Thanks, Phil, and we're all cheering for the Curiosity rover.
Oh, me too. And thanks a lot, Tom. I appreciate it.
All right. We're going to go now and talk to Steve Sell, Deputy Operations Lead for the Entry, Descent, and Landing Team. Joining us now is Steve Sell. He is the Sky Crane Specialist on JPL's Entry, Descent, and Landing Team. Thanks for talking with us today, Steve.
Oh, no problem.
So I want to start by just asking what drew you to this mission?
Oh, well, it's a very exciting mission. I like it because we're doing several things that have never been done before. It's the largest rover we've ever flown, and we're doing some new and exciting technologies like the sky crane, for example, and guided entry, and it's allowing us to accomplish much more than past missions have.
Now, we've got a lot of tech fans in our audience, and they all want to know what kind of technology is in there, what kind of processors, networking, et cetera. What can you tell us is in both the delivery vehicle and the lander?
Oh, well, it's actually kind of all very boring stuff. It's very tried.
Not to our audience, it's not.
We use a Rad 750 as the main processor. We actually have two of those, so a primary and a backup. And we use a bus called 1553 for communicating to all the various sensors and actuators that are located throughout the spacecraft. And that's a very common bus. It's used a lot in applications for space and military. It's highly reliable. It's got built-in redundancy, and it allows us to basically keep a lot of robustness in the communications throughout the vehicle.
Is it all hardened communications? Are there cables? Are there Ethernet cables? Is there anything a consumer would recognize in there?
No, there's nothing. It's not Ethernet. It's similar to Ethernet. It's just a 1553 protocol, and those are all through just coax. Those are coax cables. It's highly shielded. The communications actually is a little bit slower than typical Ethernet. It's about a megabit per second or so on those lines, and that's all done to keep things very simple and robust.
How does one become a sky crane specialist exactly?
Well, a lot of it is just being at the right place at the right time. But whenever JPL starts to put together these missions, they just they pull from. We have an entry, descent, and landing group here at JPL, and as the mission starts to come together in the design phase, we're pulling in people from those groups, and I was the one that came in to be the systems engineer for the sky crane portion of the mission.
So tell us about what's going to happen during the landing, especially the part that you're concerned with. There were several people in our audience who were wondering why it is so complex and why you need a sky crane to lower the lander to the surface.
Well, we get that a lot, actually.
Yeah, I bet you do.
It does look crazy when you just first see it, but as you go through the design and all the reasoning that went into every decision we made, it actually turns out that it's all the result of very rational and logical thought. And the reasons we went to a system like Sky Crane to land the rover is past missions have used things like legged landers or airbags. And the legged lander systems, the problems with those are when you're trying to land a 1-ton rover, you have to have big rocket engines to complete the final portion of the descent. And you have big rocket engines, you want to keep those big rocket engines away from the surface. You don't want to be firing those things just a few feet above the surface. And so that kind of makes the legs want to be a lot taller. And so when you have the legs taller and now the rover on top of those legs, you then tend to be top heavy, and that makes it more difficult to be stable while you're touching down. In addition, now even if you did land on the surface with tall legs and the rover on top, you have to deploy some kind of complicated ramp system or other way of getting the rover off the top of that platform. With airbags, like we used on the MER rovers and the Pathfinder rovers, the airbag system, when you scale it up to land something that's 1 ton, you then have to get out of the inside of those airbags. Now, on MER and Pathfinder, there was a retraction mechanism that the airbags would deflate once we were on the surface, and it would retract the deflated airbags kind of under the pod, and then we would drive off the top of that. In order to make the system work for a 1-ton rover, those airbags would have to be much, much, much larger, and it's almost impossible to figure a way to retract those airbags reliably and make a safe path to drive the rover off the top. And so we decided that another approach was needed. And when you look at, if you extend the airbag system, actually, you start to also have to slow down your descent so that the airbags wouldn't pop if you're trying to land a 1-ton rover. And we were looking at that and said, geez, we got to be going slow enough so these airbags wouldn't pop even if we made them really big. So, we're almost going slow enough that a rover could just land on its wheels. And so the idea of being able to just land on our wheels ready to go was born, and that's how we invented the sky crane system.
It sounds incredibly elegant, this idea of, dropping down out of the sky and then touching it softly down on the surface. There's an appeal there as well. Tell us a little bit about how the sky crane portion of the landing is going to work.
So the way it works is as we're descending toward the surface, for the last several hundred meters, so the last 200 to 300 meters, we're going straight down towards the surface. And when we get 20 meters above the surface, or a little over 60 feet, we still maintain our slow descent towards the surface, but the rover separates from the descent stage. So we call the descent stage, or where the rockets are, we call that the descent stage. And the rover will separate from that descent stage and lower itself down slowly below the descent stage to about it'll be hanging about 7 meters below the descent stage, and that whole system just keeps descending toward the surface until the rover is on the ground.
And where does the sky crane go after it sets the rover down? This is a question from Jason, one of our listeners. He wants to know if you can give me an altitude adjustment. He just wanted to make the pun, but what happens to the crane?
Well, what happens is after we know that the rover is on the surface, so we take about 1.5 seconds to completely be sure that the rover's weight is completely supported by the surface, and then we cut the 3 bridles that are holding the rover, and the descent stage portion just throttles up and flies itself away to about 400 meters away from the rover, and it does do a crash landing. So in a sense, its last act is to throw itself away.
You're just trying to get it far enough away that it doesn't cause any more dust kicking up. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's right. We want to make sure that it's safely far enough away from the rover that no damage could occur. There's pressurized tanks there. They still have some fuel remaining in them, and we just want to make sure that it impacts the ground far enough away that it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, you don't want it to land on the rover either, obviously.
Exactly.
How will we know that all of this worked?
Well, while we're landing, we have 2 ways of communicating to Earth. The first is through a system of tones, and we've used those in previous missions, which are simply just radio signals that are sent from this spacecraft. They're very simple. You can almost think of them as keys on a piano, and you assign a different meaning for each key. So all the radio receivers on Earth here have to do is just hear that signal, and we know that the spacecraft has made it to various points along the entry, descent, and landing sequence. The other way is once we get closer to touchdown, about 5 minutes before touchdown or so, we will be able to use the Mars Odyssey spacecraft, which is already in orbit around Mars, as a relay to relay back high-rate data. Now, what we call high-rate data is 8 kilobits per second, so I'm sure that's appalling to a lot of the viewers there. But 8 kilobits per second is all we get back. But to us on the ground, that is a wealth of information, and so we should be able to track the progress of the entire landing and all the way through about 5 minutes after landing.
The tones makes me think of Close Encounters. Are they programmed to?
We thought about trying to program them to play a song in the if it went through the nominal sequence, but reality set in, and we had to just get the work done.
Yeah, I can imagine. So the tones will just tell you what, success or not?
The tones are more like just markers that it got to certain stages along the way. So parachute deployed, a tone will sound when that happens. When the back shell separation happens, so when the jetpack first fires up, like you'll get a tone there. So they're more just like markers that it's reached certain milestones. We don't actually get any information there. We also have a few tones that are designed to just indicate that the system is healthy. But we can't, for example, transmit numbers or data or pictures back with the tones.
Now, when will you get the first tone versus the more rich data that you're getting from Odyssey?
We will get the first tone about 11 minutes before entry into the atmosphere. and then we pick up the Odyssey high rate data about 2 minutes after we've entered the atmosphere. So for the first 13 to 14 minutes or so, the only information we'll have are these tones.
So will success of the landing come from the tone, or will you have to wait for confirmation from Odyssey?
So we actually, due to orbital geometry, the Earth will actually set from view of the spacecraft before we land. So the only information we'll have at landing is the Odyssey relay. So that's our confirmation that everything went well.
Now, is there anything you'll be doing during the descent other than, like the rest of us, just watching and waiting? Do you have any actions that you can or need to take?
There is nothing that we can actually do during the descent and landing from Earth. The speed of light delay in transmitting the signal takes about 14 minutes for signals to reach to travel between Earth and Mars. So the whole landing sequence from the time we hit the atmosphere until we're on the ground is only 7 minutes long. So there's really no interaction we can have with the spacecraft as it's going through entry, descent, and landing. And in fact, the last time we actually send a command to the spacecraft is 2 hours before all of this occurs. So during the event itself, it's just rooms full of engineers here at JPL hanging on every byte of information that comes in through the relay, and we're paying attention to that. The reason it's important that we pay attention to that is, should something go wrong and we actually not have as good of a landing as we had hoped, we want to make sure we understand what the state of the spacecraft is, what the state of the rover is when it's on the surface. We want to make sure that we have as much information as fast as possible.
Now, and there are commands you can send that will take 14 minutes to get there, obviously, but afterwards to try to reboot things or adjust?
That's right, but those would actually happen about 2 hours later when Odyssey has to go. Odyssey will set view of the spacecraft. It goes around Mars. We get another communications path with Odyssey 2 hours later. However, there is no intended commanding during that pass as well. That's more of a information relay back from the rover, sending some pictures and things like that.
I don't know if you know this, but some people in our chat room immediately started wondering what programming language the software is written in.
It's written in C.
Okay.
Yep.
Easy enough. Not C++, just C.
There is some C++ as well, but in general, it's C. We use VxWorks as our operating environment on the spacecraft, and so it's written in that.
Great. So what will you do after the landing? Do you have a continued role in the mission as it does its exploration?
Well, the entry, descent, and landing team will remain engaged for very intently for the first few days after landing as we start to get more and more information back. As you can imagine, the spacecraft is actually recording megabytes and megabytes of data on the way down, and we can only send back a very small portion of that. It's actually, during the event itself, it's less than a megabyte. It's about 760K or so of data will come back during landing. But we want the several hundred megabytes of high rate data that actually got recorded so that we can understand how well our analysis and pre-landing predictions were. And so that stuff will start getting transmitted back in the days and weeks following landing. And so the EDL team will really stay engaged for a while. And so we go through this process of reconstructing what actually happened. And then that helps future missions understand basically how well we were able to predict what would happen and how well our computer models work and things like that.
And that gets squeezed back at 8 kilobits per second?
That'll actually come back at a higher rate. Once the rover's on the ground, they can up the transmission rate through Odyssey. When the rover's not moving around a lot, the signal's a lot more stable. And so they do something. It's an adaptive data rate that they can do as Odyssey passes overhead. It's about a 10-minute window each time, and they can go up to about a megabit at the peak transmission rate during those. So we can get a few megabytes of information back per Odyssey pass And we can also use the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, another spacecraft around Mars. So we get roughly 4 opportunities to get data back per day at those much higher data rates.
Curiosity has the same problem we do. When we're stable, we get a better data connection than when we're moving around.
And that's why we keep the data rate so low during landing, because the spacecraft's going through a lot of violent maneuvering and quick turns and things like that. And we want to make sure that the Odyssey spacecraft can remain locked on the carrier signal.
Now, what's the first order of business for Curiosity after landing? What does it do first, assuming everything has gone well?
Well, assuming everything goes well, the first thing that happens is we take 2 pictures with what we call the HazCams, which are cameras that are mounted on the very front of the rover and the rear of the rover. And those will hopefully, if we can maintain the link with Odyssey long enough, those will come down about 3 to 4 minutes after we land. Then over the next few days and weeks, the surface team will take over operation of the vehicle, and they will start deploying the cameras. There's a mast cam that we deploy that will be about 6 to 7 feet off the ground, that has stereo cameras on it. We'll start to take the first panoramic image where we do a 360-degree photo of where we landed and the landing site. They start to activate various systems like the arm, and releasing all the restraints that are holding the arm down, and basically starting to check out all the systems, find out how they survived the landing event, and getting the vehicle ready to start its surface science mission.
What resolution are the images that you'll be able to send back? And will you be sending back any video as well? To answer the resolution, I'm not 100% sure of the resolution. It's a very high resolution camera. These images are very similar to the panoramic camera images that you've seen from MER and so Spirit and Opportunity, the rovers that are there now. We will be sending back a very interesting video over the first few weeks, and I didn't mention this before, but there is a camera mounted on the bottom of the rover looking down. So we will actually get about a 3 to 4 frame per second movie of the final part of the landing. So basically, after the heat shield comes off the capsule, from there all the way down, we'll actually have a movie of that. It's a low frame rate, but it's something I'm really looking forward to getting. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I can't wait to see that myself. How long does NASA anticipate that the mission will last? I know there's a different power source here that can give it a little extra life.
That's right. We have a radioisotope thermoelectric generator on the rover, which is a fancy name for a nuclear battery. Generates electricity through radioactive decay heat, and that power source will last for probably much longer than the rover will. But the planned surface mission is 1 Martian year, which is about 2 Earth years, and hopefully we'll get a lot more use of it out of that. Or beyond that.
Is there a lot of data stored on the machine, or is it more of a buffer and it's sent back continuously?
Well, we do have several gigabytes of flash storage on the rover, and a lot of what happens is it can store a lot of data and then transmit back parts of that allow us on the ground to then decide which chunks of that are the most important. So you can imagine that it could be recording a whole lot of different information, 90% of which is uninteresting scientifically, but 10% of it might be extremely interesting scientifically. And so by sending back snapshots or thumbnails of images or things like that, we can then decide which of those images or science data that we want to send back the full resolution of.
Best of luck. I'm cheering for you guys. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, we are too. I mean, this has been, some of us, I've been on the project for 6 years. A lot of people here have been on for much longer than that, up to 10 years. And then there's a whole, the entry, descent, and landing is just the start, right? Now there's a team of hundreds of scientists that are just waiting, chomping at the bit to get started.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll let you go. Thanks again, man.
All right, thank you.
All right. That was Steve Sell, who is busy right now at Ames. We recorded that a week ago, but we wanted to play it so you get some context about all the effort that went into that, how it happened, how it's going to happen, and also hear it from the guy at NASA the guy responsible from the sky crane. John, while we were listening to Steve talk, everything went well. Odyssey got into place. The Curiosity separated from the cruiser, and it's going to be headed into the atmosphere in about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, 20 seconds. Yep. Looking forward to it. It's going to be this is just such an incredible sequence of events that has to unfold for this to work. And my admiration for the team that has put this together, it's really hard to put it into words. It's such a creative, innovative approach to landing this vehicle. I'm really hoping it all goes well because what a great story. I mean, to think of tackling this problem. This is why I love engineers. You know, they see problems and they immediately look for innovative solutions. And I can't think of a more innovative solution than this sky crane procedure.
Yeah, I mean, how do you land something that big on a planet that's that far away? This sounds incredibly complex, but as they mentioned over and over in that 7 minutes of terror video that they put out to try to dramatize what's going on here, it is really sensible when you think about it. When you think, like, how else would you do this?
Well, yeah. When you've got if it weren't for the fact that Mars is a very dusty planet, it wouldn't be such a big deal in the sense that you could use those rockets and lower the craft without the use of the crane because you wouldn't have to worry about dust clouds flying up and then possibly fouling the instruments of the rover itself. But the fact that you have this dust problem that you have to contend with, that's what really made it an interesting problem beyond getting a rover to Mars and landing it on a planet.
Beyond that very simple challenge that they had to overcome.
I mean, we haven't even talked about things like transfer orbits. I mean, the fact that you have to plan how the Earth and Mars come into a similar orbit together. You can't launch the rocket when Mars and Earth are closest together because that's not the most economic use of your fuel. You have to do it before that in a trajectory so that when Mars is at a certain point, the rocket is also, actually by that point, the spacecraft is also at that certain point so that you can actually have a descent. It's incredible. I mean, this launched November 26th in 2011. This is an incredible engineering feat just to get the rocket to Mars at the right time.
Yeah.
It only happens once every 2 years, really.
Standing on a moving train, shooting a bullet at another moving train that's 100,000 kilometers away, and having
and the bullet has to come apart and lower part of the bullet down.
Yeah.
A little bitty.
Right. Right. Yeah. Jimmy, can we get a little sound up from NASA because I want to be able to hear when they start to talk.
And by the way, there is no Vegas action or offshore action on this, although our TWiT resident handicapper, Mitsula, who works at a Vegas sportsbook, said that he would lay 1 to 3 favorite odds for a safe landing and total failure being an even money underdog.
I look at that control room sometimes, and I wonder if they've got some side bets. I bet they do. They're probably not huge dollar amounts.
No one would. No, who's low
with each other?
Maybe
not on like crash landing, but like are you going to be within your seconds tolerance?
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Like an over/under.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
I was about to say because otherwise you're going to see like some guy with a big full coffee mug just leaning precariously against some equipment.
Hey, we got some peanuts here.
Didn't he bet against?
Peanuts is a tradition at NASA for good luck. So,
Tom,
John, if you got
every single time I'm on TWiT, you have food.
You're the one person with the allergy to everything. You don't have an allergy to peanuts, do you?
No. I just toss it at the screen.
Here we go. We're a minute and a half away from getting the signal that Curiosity has entered. Now, keep in mind, that's a 14-minute-old signal for a 7-minute descent. So at this point, the Mars rover will already have been on the surface of Mars one way or another.
Yeah, no matter what has happened,
it's there.
It has already happened.
Yeah.
Nearly 14 minutes that's how long it takes for electromagnetic radiation to get from Mars to Earth. That's pretty phenomenal, too.
That's just fine because the difference is
1 minute to entry
within spitting distance.
You may recognize, if you're looking at the control room scene, just not what we have on air, but you may recognize the guy who started off the 7 minutes of terror video right there. Probably feeling a little butterflies of terror in his stomach as we get within seconds of hoping to hear that tone. "29 seconds from expecting to hear the tone.
30 seconds.
That Curiosity has successfully entered the atmosphere and begun the part of the descent where the atmosphere slows it down."
Yeah, at this point, the spacecraft is traveling at more than 13,000 miles per hour. So it's actually increased its speed since just traveling to Mars.
Does science ever get this
We're seeing heartbeat tones
suspenseful?
again after the switch. Things are looking
I
good.
would say that the moon landing definitely was.
But it's only these moments where
Yeah.
you have such a confluence.
Vehicle reports entry interface.
There we go. Reports entry interface.
Yep.
At this time, it'll begin pressurizing the propulsion system to increase the thrust of the system. It'll use that for all the maneuvering in the atmosphere we're about to do.
So it is decelerating from the friction of the thin Martian atmosphere. And in about 4 minutes, it will deploy. Well, actually, it will fire off 6 tungsten
We're
weights
standing by for guidance start and the start of guided entry.
and deploy a supersonic parachute.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about Mars is that it has a very relative to Earth. It has a thin atmosphere, but it's in a trouble zone really because it's too thin for us to lower by parachute alone, but it's thick enough to actually cause friction and heat, which is why you have to have that really heavy heat shield. So yeah, it's right there where it's not quite thick enough to help us, and it's just thick enough to make it problematic.
You may have heard there, we've begun guided entry. Little applause there.
At this time, the vehicle is beginning to steer its way to the target. That is starting its first bank reversal.
So 5 more minutes of descent. And again, at this point, it's been sitting
First
there.
bank reversal complete.
Yeah,
In reality.
Peak deceleration.
in whatever state
Pass through
it
peak heating
is.
and peak deceleration. It is reporting that we are seeing G's.
It's
on
not
the order
it's not in
of,
a state,
11 to 12
Justin. It's on Mars.
Flight GDSA.
GDSA flight go.
We are processing data from Odyssey.
Good. And Odyssey, there was a lot of questions about Odyssey being able to relay the data.
Telemetry from Odyssey.
You've got telemetry from Odyssey, so that's good. That means we'll know all the way down
Copy, bank reversal 2 complete.
in 14-minute delayed time instead of 8-hour delayed time.
Standby flight. We have a connection, but we actually do not have any data yet.
Ooh, that's tense.
Copy. We can expect some intermittent contact at this time.
This sounds a lot like me and my ISP.
Reversal 3
There
started.
we go.
We are now seeing telemetry
And we have
from
our
Odyssey.
TDP.
And they got the data. Yeah.
Okay, copy.
And visualization is updated. They've entered heading alignment.
There it goes.
Medley data. At this time, Curiosity is no longer trying to control how far it's flying downrange and is just heading directly for the target.
End of range control, air used minus 1.2 kilometers.
The EDL team is reporting that that things look pretty good at the end of range control. We have converged a lot of the error, and we should be heading toward the target.
So the target is, of course, the foot of the Mountain and Gale crater.
Flight EDL, TDS warning is okay.
Copy.
Power on.
And there's
We are
the
seeing
telemetry
tone
coming from
the
Odyssey.
landing gear indicating that we have seen heating on the heat shield through the Medley instrument. Everything looks fine. This is as expected.
There's heating
So
on the
Gale-
heat shield, but that's normal.
Gale
What's that?
crater's 96-mile wide crater on Mars.
Alignment phase, we're flying almost horizontally like a plane.
Crater was created about 3 billion years ago by a meteor impact.
At an altitude of 17 kilometers or so. Vehicles reporting heartbeat tones again, indicating that everything is fine during heading alignments. We are standing by for straighten up and flight.
So the tones are being relayed through Odyssey, and everything's looking good as it's getting ready to deploy the supersonic parachute.
Down to about Mach 2. As a reminder, we should have parachute deploy around Mach 1.7.
It's the biggest one that they've ever made.
Kilometers altitude.
We've begun entry balance mass jettison. Predicted mid distance downrange is 1.597 kilometers.
So those are those 6 tungsten weights.
EDL ops, Odyssey systems on EDL ops.
Those 6 tungsten weights will get fired off, and then the parachute will deploy.
Parachute deploy. Parachute.
That's a good sign.
Mm-hmm.
Knock on wood. So we're 28 minutes after the hour. And through the parachute deployment, the next thing is the heat shield should come off.
We will control our altitude on shoot. We are decelerating.
Yeah.
Risk mode under parachute are 20 to 30
we are at
degrees per
150
second.
meters per second.
Nominal.
Dynamics phase. Come back again with wrist mode dynamics.
Wrist mode is nominal.
And at this, nominal is a good thing, by the way.
8
Yes.
active.
Valid range.
Nav filter converge with a velocity correction of 0.7 meters a second.
We've acquired the ground with the radar.
An altitude of 8 kilometers.
So what you're hearing is right after that heat shield came off, radar acquired the ground.
As expected. We're UHF all the way in the Emily engines in preparation for powered flight.
Yeah, and the next thing is those engines go on the sky crane to slow the descent. So you will have those engines throttling to 100% here.
Flight EDL, we've got some TWiT warnings. It is in battle short mode, so I should power through them.
Director Earth Communications at this time. We may have lost it already.
At this point, it's about 1.5 kilometers above the surface of
Down
Mars.
to 86 meters per second at an altitude of 4 kilometers and descending.
Okay, it's getting close to that.
We've lost tones from Earth at this time. This is expected. We're continuing on Odyssey telemetry.
So yeah, it has moved out of range for us to be able to directly observe it, but Odyssey is relaying the data.
Equals minus 10.8 meters, vertical velocity of minus 82.8 meters per second.
Start enabled, standing by for back shell separation.
Signal to Odyssey is still strong.
That's a good thing. That means they'll be able to know what's happening all the way down.
We are in powered flight.
Powered flight.
Sky crane engines have throttled up. It is now decelerating with those engines.
1 kilometer descending, about 70 meters per second.
And
Signal to Odyssey remains strong.
50 meters per second.
the next thing is that sky crane is going to lower on cables the rover to the Martian surface.
Constant velocity accordion nominal. Altitude error 5.9 meters.
We found a nice flat place. We're coming in ready for sky crane.
All right. Hold on to your butts.
40 meters altitude.
Nice flat place is exactly where they wanted to be, so it looks like it's headed to the right place. And the sky crane has started.
Descending at about 0.75 meters per second as expected. Expecting bridle cut shortly.
Bridle cut means the thing is landed.
Remain strong.
Tango Delta nominal.
Yep. UDLCOM configuration.
Rim stable.
UHF telemetry.
Rim stable.
UHF is good.
Touchdown confirmed. We're safe on Mars.
Fist pump.
Wow.
And they pulled it off, folks. The Mars Science Laboratory, a.k.a. the Curiosity rover, 14 minutes ago, successfully landed on Mars, and we just got word that it worked.
That is so amazing.
You can go ahead and leave that audio down low in the background, Jabberby. I'd love to have that. This is a triumph for NASA in more ways than one. It has captured the imagination of so many people, not just on the internet. People on TV were watching this too on a few channels, and a lot of people may have been engaging in hyperbole that NASA's future rode on this, but it certainly is a huge positive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those saying that, NASA's future with Mars rode on this is probably a little bit overstated, but certainly in terms of big money projects coming through successfully, this shows that that's obviously not only still possible, but is, the track record of record.
And did you notice the guy fist pumping 2 seconds before everybody else. I think he had his eye on a piece of data that told him everything was good before everybody else got it.
Yeah, no, he had the screen up that showed that the Mars Curiosity became the mayor of Mars on Foursquare before anybody else.
If your comm configures thumbnails coming down, rear has thumbnails coming down.
Odyssey data is still strong.
Now remember, the Mars Curiosity rover's mission begins now.
Yeah,
this is not the end was not just to get it onto the planet, but you can see they're kind of herding them back into place. Come on, people, sit down. We still got work to do. We got to get this thing in place, get it ready to go to work. John, what are some of the things that you know of that Mars Curiosity rover will be doing? It's got some amazing tools.
Sure. Yeah, it's an advancement over the geological.
Hold on a second. They got a thumbnail image in here.
Image.
Hey. Already, that's awesome.
Look at that.
Wow.
May not look like much to you, but it looks like victory to everybody in that room.
Absolutely.
Yep. Looks like victory.
We can see a wheel image.
One of the bogey wheels right there in the picture on the lower right.
We are wheels down on Mars.
That's not the highest resolution picture it'll send, by the way.
No. Yeah, it's got a whole array of cameras, especially on the mast, which is it looks almost like a periscope that is, of course, over the body. But one of the things the thing I think is the coolest piece of equipment on this rover, which is amazing already, is the laser-induced breakdown spectrometer. This rover
this is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it has a laser on it that is used to vaporize rock.
Signal Odyssey is still strong.
You can just keep it up and keep it low. It just in the background. Thanks, Jeremy.
It uses laser pulses that are at a 5 nanosecond burst. So a nanosecond, of course, is 1/1000th of a second. So this laser bursts for about 5/1000ths of a second, hits a rock, starts to vaporize it. It actually excites the electrons in the atoms of that rock so that it plasmifies. It turns into it gives off a plasma, which there's a special telescope on that mast that will detect that plasma, send it through fiber optic cable to 3 different spectrometers, which will then analyze that plasma, and then by essentially looking at the color of the plasma, determine what elements were part of that rock. And in part, this is a geological study, but it's also an attempt to discover if the building blocks for life exist on Mars. Now, this isn't looking for life on Mars. That would be a different mission, and frankly, this rover does not have the equipment necessary to be able to detect things like microscopic life, but it could detect if the building blocks necessary for life as we know it here on Earth are present on Mars or were present at one time on Mars.
Dr. Kiki is on the line, I think. Are you there, Kiki?
I am.
Hey, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
So pretty exciting. It worked.
I know. I'm sitting here in my office at home going, yay! I'm having my little celebration here, and it's fabulous. It worked. And I tweeted it out there. I love watching Mission Control celebrate. And like you mentioned, they have to get them back under control. Get back to your desks, people.
So what are some of the things about the upcoming mission that you may be most excited about, or you're looking forward to hearing about as Curiosity actually gets started doing what it went through all this trouble to get to Mars to do?
Well, it's all the science, right? This is the most technologically advanced mission that we've ever sent to Mars, and it's equipped to do so much work that we've never really been able to do before. When I was at NASA Ames on Friday, I got the chance to hear from one of the scientists who's in charge of the CheMin instrument. And the CheMin instrument is really an X-ray crystallography instrument to tell us what kind of minerals are there on the surface. And it's got the David Blake was the name of the researcher, and he's worked for 22 years to basically miniaturize and make the process of X-ray crystallography more efficient to get to the point of being able to send it on this mission to be able to look at what's there. And so it's just some neat work that's going to be done.
And Jabberby, if you could pull the NASA feed back up over there, they're getting a second image now showing a shadow. And the first image is now getting composited more into a higher resolution, so you could see the gravel that's around the lander in front of it. Check that out.
Gravel.
Kiki, if you were to explain to somebody who was not specifically science literate what this means to them today, what would you say?
I would say that this very day proves that we are still moving forward as humans, exploring the universe, grabbing the universe by the horns and learning as much about it as possible and figuring out where we belong in the universe, who we are, and finding out our place here. I mean, that's really what this is. This is that one of those steps in the journey of discovering everything about humanity that we can.
That's awesome.
I 100% agree with you, and I'm feeling that exact same feeling right now. Watching these folks, shaking hands, relief on their faces, and everybody fixated on those first two images. Not the highest resolution images we've had from Mars. They certainly aren't the most detailed, but they're a signal that every single thing worked here, and this rover will now begin the most advanced science mission on Mars that we've ever had. That's one of the disadvantages of the Curiosity mission. After all of this excitement, the 7 minutes of terror, this incredibly dramatic descent that we all just sort of lived through.
2 years of science, hard, dirty science work ahead of them, and it's not going to be easy. And the researchers I spoke with at Ames on Friday, they all were saying this is going to be 19-hour days. This is going to be months and months, years of just hard slogging work to get through the experiments that are planned, to be able to analyze all the data, and to actually bring results of, as John was mentioning earlier, more information about whether or not there might have been life on Mars at some point in its history. More information about what it's like now, how it got to be where it is right now. I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a lot of freaking hard work.
Well, but I mean, like, the landing of this gives them the opportunity to do what is so rare in science, which is give us definitive ideas of things that we would not have any idea of otherwise. Like, They can say no matter what the data comes back, they will have such a clearer idea of what goes on Mars.
Yeah. One thing that's really, really interesting, this mission isn't really set up to do it. This Curiosity mission isn't necessarily set up to do it, but there are chemical signatures, leftovers that it can look for of possible past biological activity. A NASA researcher by the name of Brad, and I'm blanking on his last name, who works with biological films, basically these photosynthesizing bacteria that we can thank for making our planet and life on it possible. These films, these mats that grow, they're like, if you look at it, they look like rocks. It just looks like stratification in a rock. But under the microscope, there are signatures that are unmistakable for life. And so these are the kinds of things that we can start to look for. We can start to look for evidence of methane production, signatures that might have said, oh, there was methane production at one point in time, and that would be indicative of there having been life. Really just all the little pieces, the detective work that's going on, I'm just so excited about.
Now, Kiki, you and John are actually both really, really good at helping people understand what science means. And so I want both of you to answer this question. But as they start doing the hard science, what can people in our audience look for, and how can they help other people understand the importance of what's coming? Because we won't see the big flashy sky crane type things that it's easier to wrap your head around. How can people interpret the results in a way that helps them to understand the importance of what we may or may not be learning?
Do you want to go with that first, John?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think one way is that NASA has really become incredibly savvy when it comes to leveraging social platforms. And we talked about this a little bit before we really started with the whole show, but NASA's gotten very good about messaging out interesting information using its various Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, things like that, to the point where, I mean, even now they're calling, instead of calling it a tweet up over at the Kennedy Space Center, they call it a social, because they want to try and encompass all of the different social platforms as much as they can. They're so proactive on getting onto those social platforms and messaging out interesting information that I think NASA is going to be doing a lot of this work for us, in the sense that we are going to get regular updates whenever there's something interesting to share with everyone. So part of that is already taken care for a lot of people who are interested in these projects, because they're already following those accounts.
Curiosity Rover on Twitter, at Mars Curiosity is what you want to follow. And NASA JPL is another good one, NASA JPL.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we're already seeing the rover tweet about itself in the first person, so we can all get emotionally attached to the rover.
And it's got the first picture already up on its Twitter account. If you're looking for a copy, they don't have the higher resolution or the second picture yet, but I bet those will be coming shortly.
I do hear that they have Instagram on it, so we should expect those filters applied.
Oh, great.
It looked like they were taken by the Viking landers.
Yes, I was just going to say the same thing. So, Kiki, do you have anything to add to that? Because I think that's a really good answer, John, is pay attention to NASA, follow the Twitter accounts.
Pics are up on their Twitter already.
Pics, or it didn't happen. Well, now we know it.
Yes, it did.
I think following all the NASA social media definitely, and the community that they're building around it. So there are a lot of people who attended the NASA social this week and were a part of this celebration, were invited to be a part of it. And as a result, there's just a big community with a lot of people who are really interested in this subject, who are going to be sharing information, talking about it, and it's going to be a very vibrant and dynamic thing to be a part of. But I think it is something like like John said, the social media that NASA is putting out is just getting better and better in the way that they leverage it. We got to know the Phoenix lander. We got to know Opportunity and Spirit, and we've been cheering them on. I mean, Spirit and Opportunity, the little rovers that could, and here we are with a new rover that is bigger, more advanced, better, and what can we learn from this, and can we follow its adventure and cheer it on? Follow its Twitter feed, get to know it and the people behind it. And I feel that there is that real hue, even though these are robots on another planet, they are an extension of us. And so this is just part of the best human story ever.
And I think what we're going to see from NASA that you guys are talking about, and one of the reasons you're saying, hey, they'll be the best interpreters, is the context we need. A lot of what Curiosity is going to find is going to be absence of things. It will not find this. It will not see evidence of this. It will not find the kinds of things you might expect with a certain kind of water deposits. But those absences can be as significant or more significant than findings. And what you need is somebody to explain that to you. And NASA has been doing a really good job of that.
Yeah, that's kind of how science works, which is that's the other thing, is that the thing I love about NASA's social media approach is that it not only gets people interested in space, but they really do start to get a good glimpse of the thought behind practicing science and the scientific method. And I like that this excitement is coming from this particular field, because you hear horror stories all the time about the school system and whether or not they're able to kind of evoke that sort of excitement about science, or even be able to effectively teach the scientific method. Now, both my parents are teachers, and I know they worked very hard to get those ideas across. So I know it's not the individual teacher's fault that perhaps science education may not be where we would like it to be. But the fact that this can excite people about the idea of science and get them involved in science, and maybe even encourage people to go into these fields, the young people going into fields of science and engineering. I mean, that to me is just as valuable as the information that we're going to get back from this mission.
I absolutely agree. There's so much excitement being generated around the Curiosity mission right now. It's really reminiscent of past missions, stuff related to the space shuttle. You know, we used to get excited about things that NASA did, and then there were a whole lot of technical and budgetary issues, and people got kind of down on the whole idea of NASA. And now I feel like they're really, really trying to do what they do best. Go to space, explore, do science. And the way that they're doing it, they're really showing that it's worthwhile and that we should keep funding it.
Now, just to point out, Tom made the joke earlier that of pics or it didn't happen, but just to illustrate the point that both Kiki and John are making about how effective NASA has been with their social media strategy, just a minute ago, the Mars Curiosity official Twitter says, "No photo or it didn't happen?" ? Well, looky here. I'm casting a shadow on the ground in Mars, Gale Crater. Hashtag
That's not
MSL.
Curiosity's shadow. That's a robo. Curiosity is a robot.
So there we go. I mean, just a great example of how colloquially this can be a viral element of information that just gets a really awesome, beautiful message of science out there. Kiki, let me ask you this question.
Yes.
I have a sense that with private spaceflight, and specifically SpaceX, and people like Elon Musk saying that Mars is a priority for him and his company, and the success and the track record that they've had thus far, a mission like this means more than previous Mars probe missions, because the idea of us getting people to Mars seems closer. Would you say that you feel the same way?
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of the challenges that they overcame in getting this rover to the ground, in the engineering and the technical problems. I mean, they were dealing with an object, the rover, that's larger than they've ever tried to put on the ground before, in a really safe fashion, so they didn't get dust on the instruments or smash it up in any way. And when we put people on the ground, it's going to be something very similar. It's very fragile, delicate cargo.
Are we all going to get lowered by individual sky cranes? That'd be awesome.
Who knows what the eventual plan will be, but I am certain. I actually got a chance to ask a question during the NASA social of the EDL, the Entry, Descent, and Landing team on NASA TV. It was the first time I've been really nervous about asking a question in a while. But I got to ask that question. I said, do you think what you're going to learn here is going to inspire the designs and the engineering that you use for future human missions? And everybody seemed to think that was what was going to happen. This was kind of a proving ground. Can we do something this complicated and succeed? And they did.
You know, when this is probably one of the most, I will say it is the most exciting bit of breaking news I've done at TWiT or at CNET, frankly. Just the tension, the drama, the importance and the significance of it are unsurpassed. So a huge thanks are in order to everybody participating in it. Leo for letting us do it. All you guys for co-hosting. Jammerby for running the board. And of course, somebody who's not here with us this evening, but Tony Wang was instrumental in editing that interview with Steve Sell and doing the booking and everything. And also, we need to thank our sponsor, Slingbox, who is, whenever there's breaking news on TWiT, it's brought to you by Slingbox, and it helps pay the bills, keep the lights on late into the night for us to do this kind of coverage. So I do want to give them their due. Slingbox is different. Some companies say they let you watch TV everywhere. Slingbox lets you watch your home TV where you go. You don't have to pay extra for it. You can control it from home. Works with an iPad, smartphone, iPod Touch, laptop, or tablet. To get started with Slingbox, you connect it to the internet, you connect it to your home TV, and then anywhere you go that has an internet signal, you can watch your home TV. It's that easy. Available at Best Buy and Amazon if you want to go see it in person, or you can learn more at slingbox.com/twit. And we really do thank Slingbox for their support of all of our breaking news coverage right here on TWiT. I think this is a celebratory day for almost all people. Brian Brushwood is out at a Chili's somewhere with his iPad, but he's so excited that he had to call us up. Brian, were you able to follow along with the landing?
Listening to the end of that, I made it all the way back to the hotel.
You're in the hotel room. Okay, you're not.
I can honestly say that never in my entire life has eating nachos and drinking a margarita been so thrilling. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. It was electric.
It was insane. I mean, it really felt more like the dramatic NASA landings of the 60s and 70s than it has in a long time.
Well, it's context. We knew what was going on. We knew what was at stake. It was a big money venture. It was a big opportunity for us to do a lot of very, very, very good science. Now, Brian, at Chili's, I mean, did you get a sense that there were other people that were watching, or what was the atmosphere?
That was a little bit disappointing because we had to explain, it was weird because not only at Chili's, but on the way back, we stopped and picked up some snacks. At Chili's, they're leaning forward, they're like, oh, the Olympics, huh? And we're like, no, screw the Olympics. This is scientific history being made. And then on the way back, we're at the shopette and we're getting some chips. And the guy's like, oh, you're looking at financial news? What is that? And we're like, it's the freaking Mars lander. Are you high? And it was a little bit a burst of my bubble because, we hear obviously everybody there in the chat room, everybody there at TWiT, all of the internet, eyes forward at this moment for what was a brilliantly orchestrated media campaign on the part of NASA. They really knocked it out of the park by realizing that modern people don't have time to invest themselves in every scientific venture unless they understand the context. They have to be sold upon it, which is what was so brilliant about the trailer that they did. The one thing I wish everybody understood, even within the bubble, is the distinction between up until now, everything that we've seen and celebrate is a technological triumph. Now begins the scientific achievement. Almost nothing we've seen so far really has a lot of scientific merit. It's everything that starts from here on that's the truly groundbreaking, exciting stuff.
Literally groundbreaking with lasers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about some of the things that the Curiosity rover is going to do and some of the results that it's going to do. Anything else, John, that you want to add that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to talk just really quickly. We mentioned about the whole thinking of the Curiosity as sort of a precursor to getting people to Mars. I just wanted to give people an idea of how big a challenge that is if we want to get people to Mars and get them back again. If we wanted to get people to Mars, you have to keep in mind that you have to wait for that 2-year launch window if you want to minimize the amount of fuel that you need to get from Earth to Mars, and it's about an 8-month journey even then. Once you land on Mars, then you have to have the ability to keep everyone alive, obviously, with the oxygen, water, food, that sort of stuff. And you can't just lift off of Mars and head back to Earth. You actually have to wait for that opportunity to come around again. It's almost 2 years. It's 23 and a half months to get to the point where you can launch from Mars to get back to Earth, which means that by the time you land back on Earth, assuming everything has gone well, because of course, anything goes wrong, you don't really have a team there like you would on Earth to fix everything. Assuming everything goes well, it would take about 32 months from the time you launched from Earth to the time you got back to Earth. So nearly 3 years. That's the minimum amount of time a mission would take to get to Mars and back.
And so that's not spending any time on Mars, right? That's just the travel time?
Just there and back.
No. 3 years it takes about 8 months to get there.
You would have to
you'd
spend
be
time
forced
on
to
Mars.
spend time on Mars, but that's not counting in extra time if you have particular missions or anything like that.
Right. So essentially you would have 2 years to do whatever missions you wanted to do. So as opposed to going to the moon where you jumped off the capsule and then you hit a golf ball and you
and head back home. Right. You actually that's a good point. You
did a push-up, ate an egg on it.
You have time. You have time to get a lot done, but you're forced to get a lot done, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Well, either that or you're forced to get a little bit done and then slowly go space crazy. But there are a lot of problems there, and it's not just technological. There are other issues like the psychological toll it would take on people to be gone for that long. And keep in mind, the Apollo spacecraft was a 6-ton spacecraft. And it was just to go to the moon and back. And I say just. I mean, it was amazing, right? But to get to Mars and back, you would have to have a larger spacecraft, assuming that you're going to send – I think NASA said that they found out the ideal size for a team would be 6 people so that they would meet all the parameters they would need to meet. So 6 people would be in a vehicle that would be significantly larger than 6 tons, which means you have even more challenges to land. Now, that's not to say that the Mars rover isn't another step toward that goal. It definitely is. I just want people to remember that the goal is huge.
It's a long goal, yeah.
We had a group of people that went on a boat and they ended up on an island. You know, it's supposed to just be a 3-hour tour.
An 8-month tour.
3 coconuts. 3 coconuts and we'll get to Mars.
People talk about the psychological issues as if this is something that's brand new and it's never been done before. But humans throughout history have headed out into the unknown on horse-covered wagons, on ships, on... just on
covered wagons pulled by horses is what you mean.
Horse-covered wagons.
That's now. Let me tell you, the psychological.
We've used dial-up internet.
Exactly.
I find this fascinating because
stress has been dealt with over and over again, and people have flourished. This is nothing new. I think that's just that's something that people get all excited about, but it's no big deal.
Why do you suppose it is that on the summit of a technological achievement for an independent robot being deployed to another planet, and we saw the same thing with Pathfinder, it seems like every time we successfully get a robot into another planet, the discussion instantly goes to what this means for sending people there. Do you think it's a case where, because, Carl Sagan made a very impassioned case for why it was a waste of time and resources to send people. It's, it's biochemical soups that are really difficult to delicately place and return, and there's all these ethical concerns, and it slows down the scientific achievement by trying to send people there. And yet, on the flip side, you have someone like James Cameron who says it's a tragedy that not one woman has ever seen all of Earth as a round orb. The most we've gotten is the up on the International Space Station, where he describes it as the equivalent of placing your cheek against a basketball. He says it's a tragedy that we're not exploring anymore, and he presents a very impassioned case for getting off planet, for sending people to other planets. Is it a case where we're happy enough to have the scientific discovery, but deep down, all of us, we just have it in us that we want to be among the stars?
I think that it's a mixture of both. I mean, not everybody wants to learn every single detail about how everything works. I think science is fascinating because of the curiosity that is intrinsic to it. But at the same time, people want to go through life and hear stories. They want to hear about adventure. They want to be connected to the universe in some way. And I think this is how we do it. I think science is deeply intertwined with it. And so there are a lot of people, like you mentioned, who think just send robots into space. We don't need to send people. And I really think that is, that's just the wrong way to do it, because we as people want to know more about our universe, and we want to be out there exploring. We don't want robots to do it. We want to go with the robots.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Everybody on this panel and everybody that Brian just mentioned is way smarter than me. But I'll just say this. In a zero-sum way, to me, it seems like the very definition of humanity and the survivability of our species is tied to becoming a multi-planet species. just in the idea that if something terrible happened to Earth, there would be a survivability that we would not have otherwise. And to me, the context of sending something successfully to Mars, if you're not going to put it in the context of how do we get humans to Mars, I don't know what else it does mean. You know, to me, of course it means that. It means the inherent survivability of our species is the first and last thing we are always going to think of.
And I love the term that my co-host Justin on This Week in Science has coined and has used for a long time, which is Marsifest destiny. So instead of the manifest destiny that you know the early settlers of the United States had, Thomas Jefferson, you know, get across this continent. Marsifest destiny, come on, and that's just the beginning.
So we should conquer Mars.
Yeah.
And keep in mind also, this is something that we talk about on the Weird Things podcast. Andrew Main, the missing piece of that puzzle, is very adamant in that he doesn't think that there's any point in really trying to terraform or develop Mars because there are volumes. There's much, much more unused real estate in the bajillions of asteroids all over the solar system. It's going to be much easier to go in and carve out a specific environment that you can make. You don't need to terraform. You don't have to condition air that no human will ever breathe. You just handle these little pods and create these miniature city states all throughout the galaxy or throughout the system anyway.
Even so, the Mars the experience we have sending vehicles to Mars can inform us even in that sort of sense. So it's it's a win-win either way.
And NASA's not limiting themselves to Mars. I mean, there are plenty of asteroid exploratory missions on the books as well. If they get funded and if they're allowed to be carried out, we'll do just that. I want to bring us back to what just happened a mere 20 minutes ago, though. Jammerby, if you can take my screen, the latest post from the Curiosity rover on Twitter actually has it was once one small step, now it's 6 big wheels. Here's a look at one of them on the soil of Mars. This is the higher resolution picture. That was the first picture we got back, relayed through Odyssey. You can't see much. There's a sun up there in the sky. There's a lot of dirt on the lens, a lot of rocks on the ground, but that one wheel right there in the right front that was so gently touched down by that sky crane on a pre-programmed course that had no human intervention. Just an incredible achievement.
It is a mind-boggling engineering achievement. It really is. The more you learn about it, the more you are impressed with it from literally every facet of that mission. It is amazing.
I don't know if you guys have already posted it, but somebody in the chat posted a photograph that gives a context of how much larger this rover is than Pathfinder or Curiosity.
It's the size of what, a Mini?
Mini Cooper usually is what they seem to more often compare it to. I'm
looking forward to the Mars version of the Italian Job, the Martian Job, where you see
Sure.
Gone in 60 seconds.
Gone in 7
Somebody
minutes.
stole the Curiosity. Right?
Gone in 8 months, and then 2 years before you could return.
Now, I know it takes a lot of engineering expertise. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of preparation. You saw that room full of people that it took to monitor this and make sure that it went off well. But I think that Justin and I had a little bit to do with it, and the audience here at the TWiT studio, because we were eating peanuts.
Listen, I'm not a superstitious man.
Very good luck.
But you all owe us because we totally had a hand in this.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. That was very thoughtful of you.
You're welcome.
I thank you, and Mars thanks you.
And can we take this NASA screen, Jammerby? Because they've got both the pictures up now, side by side. We've seen both of these a couple times, but it's just cool to see them both there.
How amazing is it that we are just in? I mean, number one, the idea that we were even getting information back this fast is just really, really astounding. And then, just in such quick succession, the clarity of these images. Each one that comes through is sharper and sharper, and it's only going to get more so as the telemetry comes back, more and more and clearer and clearer.
As we get the higher rate data, which takes a lot longer to get transferred back and compiled. Final thoughts from everybody as we wrap up our coverage here of the success. We lost Brian, so his final thoughts were goodbye.
Yes.
But as we wrap up our coverage of the successful landing of the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity on the surface of Mars, and Kiki, I know you probably need to get back to some other duties there. I heard them mewing in the background. So give us our final thoughts. What do you think?
I was watching Kai. His little boy. He's awake for the scientific history. I don't know if it actually sunk in at all.
Good man, Kai.
He was awake for it, and he's wearing his alien monster truck pajamas, ready to meet the Martians. But I just was thinking about the fact that they kept saying, we don't know if we're going to get any information back right away. We don't know what we're going to hear.
I know.
We'll get information back, Kai. Don't worry. It landed successfully.
Yeah, I don't know what we're going to hear or how fast. And at one point during the NASA social, they said, it could be a month before we hear anything. And everybody was gearing up to a big, exciting night tonight. And I was like, after everything that NASA has put into this, I just hope that it's not a fizzle. That I hope it's not a slow burn. And they knocked it out of the park.
They sure did.
The engineering, the mastery, the knowledge that went into troubleshooting and creating everything that went into getting Curiosity mission onto the surface of the red planet is brilliant. And I'm just looking forward to more brilliance as it proceeds. But additionally, I was taking the opportunity to look back at my photos from the Viking mission to Mars today as I was looking at it. And this 1976 to, what now 2012, there's just so much that we've learned, and there will be so much more for us to learn. And I'm just thrilled. And thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
Kiki, thank you so much for staying up and calling in and being a part of it with us. Really appreciate it.
Staying up. I couldn't go to sleep.
I know. Go watch This Week in Science, folks. TWIS.org.
Absolutely.
And this week, so we are not on TWiT TV anymore, but we are broadcasting every Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time through Google Plus Hangouts. So YouTube Live, go to youtube.com/TheDrKiki is the easiest way. And you'll be able to watch us live every Thursday. And we have a chat room. We'll give information out on that if you want to keep up. And this week, of course, we will be talking about Mars Curiosity a lot. So don't think the conversation ends here tonight.
If you want more Marsafest Destiny talk, check it out.
That's right.
TWIS.org. Thanks, Kiki. Justin Robert Young, your impressions now. You're an enthusiast. I could tell you're a fan.
Oh, no. I mean, it was something that I don't know whether this was on the episode proper, but, I had kind of mentioned that I do believe that this is a golden age for science and for space enthusiasts and people who want to be excited by the kind of advancements that we're making. To me, I don't draw a line between private and public, between NASA and companies like SpaceX and what Planetary Resources hopes to do, and all the other companies that are vying for NASA money but are privately owned to explore the cosmos. It's amazing to me, and it to me shows that we have a momentum. We have a very beautiful and important momentum, and it's something that I hope that as we all kind of watch it and appreciate it, it becomes more and more important to all of us, to the point where we could hopefully at some point, sooner rather than later, make really significant leaps for us as a human race, beyond just flags and footprints.
Get off this rock.
That to me, it would be it's something that is increasingly less silly of an idea, and that's just a gorgeous thought to me.
But if you like silliness, check out an NSFW show.
Yeah, NSFW show on Tuesday. But we do weirdthings.com. Me, Brian Brushwood, and Andrew Main. We talk a ton about space, and we will certainly be talking ad nauseum about the Mars Curiosity lander when we record our next episode. So go ahead and subscribe to that, the Weird Things podcast.
John Strickland staying up the latest of all of us because he's in a different time zone. Thank you so much as well. What do you make of all this? What are your final thoughts looking at those two pictures and thinking about this rover about to get to work up there on Mars?
So I'm excited in equal measure over the feat of engineering of actually getting this rover onto Mars and keeping it viable. The upcoming science that we're going to perform on the surface of Mars, and the fact that NASA really does seem to have nailed this problem of communicating science to the general public in a way that is compelling, and you can't help but feel excited about it. So all three of those things to me are remarkable achievements. And it may sound like that third one is the least impressive. I completely disagree. As someone who tries to explain how the universe works, that's a huge leap to try and get to a point where you're not only explaining how it works, but you're doing it in a way that people care about it. And NASA's really been doing a great job with that recently over the last several years. And I am thrilled, because if you've ever spoken with engineers or scientists who are really, really amazing experts in their field, not all of them are the best at communicating that to someone who is not really entrenched in that. And it's clear they've done a lot of work in learning how to communicate that to people so that it is easier to understand why this is so exciting and wonderful and why we should care. So all of that to me is phenomenal.
Absolutely agree. And as you mentioned, it helps you in your job,
Yes.
not, as a side benefit, telling people how things work at howthingswork.com.
How stuff works.
How stuff works. Sorry. We have how things work up on the site, so we'll fix that in the edited version. Howstuffworks.com. Apologize for that. And the Tech Stuff podcast, which folks can subscribe to as well.
Yes, and I also want to mention on the Science Channel, because How Stuff Works is part of Discovery Communications, the Science Channel actually has a special that'll be, well, for me, it'll be on later tonight. But for you guys, tomorrow night, it's the Mars Landing 2012, The New Search for Life. It comes on at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and Pacific Time. And I wanted to recommend that because it's going to go more into detail about what the Curiosity rover will be doing on Mars from here on out, and what it's going to be looking for, and what that would actually mean in terms of the search for life in our own solar system besides Earth, obviously.
Awesome. Well, John, can't thank you enough. And you're going to be on Tech News Today tomorrow, later on?
In a few hours, yes.
All right. I'm going to owe you huge for that. And but always a pleasure. And thanks for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Loved it.
I'm going to finish up. John, if you could take my screen. Someone in the chat room sent me this animated GIF. This pretty much sums up how I feel today. It's those folks jumping up and down with abandon inside of the control room at the end of this. It's just an incredible feat that they all accomplished. And you can tell they didn't know it was going to work.
No.
And in fact, NASA is full of scientists, and they were telling people, hey, you know what? 30% of the Martian missions have succeeded. Just keep that in mind. Keep that in the back of your head in case this all goes wrong. But it went off without a hitch. There were a couple of very minor errors that had no effect on the success of the mission. And I don't think I can stress enough how much I appreciate the job that all those folks at Ames, at JPL, at NASA did in figuring out this logical, sensible, but crazy way of getting this large rover to Mars to help advance science, advance exploration, and push humanity out, to where it has never gone before someday. So they're about to have a press briefing over at NASA on the live stream. We'll carry that as well. But thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. Thanks to Slingbox for supporting us with breaking news. And thanks to Leo for letting us do this. And thanks most of all to everybody who supports space research and supports science. I hope you keep it going. That's it for this episode of TWiT Live special number 134, the successful landing of the Mars Curiosity rover. See you later.